We just heard from the Acts of the Apostles today, and really we're going to hear from the Acts of the Apostles all through this season of resurrection, of Easter joy. And especially during the week, we have the first reading always from the Acts of the Apostles. And it's really trying to show what happened after Jesus rose from the dead and eventually ascended back into heaven. What happened to that community? How was that community able to function? What did that community have to do? What motivated that community? And how did they deal with this newfound faith? I'd suggest that they focused on 4 activities that bound them together and motivated them. They first dedicated themselves to the teachings of the apostles. In the very beginning, some of the apostles were still around, but eventually as they died away and became a little unable to do what they once did, the people would get together and say, well, what did we hear from them? What did they tell us about Jesus? What were the miracles that he performed? What did Jesus really have as a focus in his life that he passed on to these apostles? And so they studied that, and then they tried to put it into practice. The second thing that they did was they devoted themselves to communal life. They were suddenly a minority. They were still Jewish, but they had taken on this way, the way of Jesus. And so they became, in a sense, a minority community. And because of that, they were kind of ostracized in many ways, sometimes even persecuted. And so they had to find a way to stay together. And so they began to do different things. They appointed deacons eventually to help them. They shared together meals. They took care of the poor. They gave some of their resources to help those that had needed a special help. Thirdly, they gathered for the breaking of the bread. Even though they still held on to some of the Jewish traditions and even maybe worshiped at the temple, they realized that this was something new. And so they gathered in their homes and celebrated what we are celebrating, really, the Mass. The outline in the early church describes what they did, and it's pretty much the outline that when we gather for liturgy to do. And so they dedicated them to that. And that became really the focus of bringing them together, the breaking of the bread. And finally, they gathered together and were committed for prayer. That they knew if they're going to be able to be this community, to be true followers of Jesus, to exist in the difficulties of being that community, they needed to be in touch with the Lord. So they prayed for that strength. They prayed for each other. And they prayed that they may do the will of the Lord. I would like to think that these activities that the apostles focused on are not a real bad outline of what we as a faith community could do. Just as our ancestors in the faith were committed to creating a learning church, a loving church, a worshiping church, and evangelizing church, so should we have this as our mission today here at Our Lady of the Lake. We are called as church to embody the Father's love, to allow all that Jesus taught and all that Jesus practiced to become a part of us so that we can carry those actions and those gifts to others to help in passing and bringing out the good news of Jesus. Because we're part of a wider church, the Diocese of Kalamazoo, we are also asked to do our part to make it possible for the bishop to achieve these same goals, and also the special goals that the bishop sets up for us every year. He has defined these goals as 3 this year. First, the recruitment and educational support of candidates for the priesthood. Our clergy today is getting old. Hello. And there's 6 or 7 men that are older than I. and I'll be 75 in a month, there are 5 or 6 others of us that are still in ministry at that age. 50% of our clergy were not born in this country. They have come here to be missionaries. That we have priests from Mexico, from South America, from India, and also several priests from Africa. Where we used to be the sending country of missionaries are now the receiving countries for missionaries. And so the bishop sees this as a great priority, that we foster vocations, we encourage vocations, and then provide the means that those that want to do that will have the education and that's needed to allow that to happen. Secondly, the bishop needs our support to make possible all diocesan programs that help our families to make and to live better their faith. Family becomes very important to the bishop. He knows that families, and it's not easy today, that there's many challenges in how to bring the good news of Jesus to them, how to help them in living their Christian faith as parents and as children. And so many programs in the diocese try to do that, and the bishop wants to support those even more. And the bishop also finally wants to support a way for education, ongoing education, for not just the clergy, but for all the people of the diocese. And they're setting up an institute to activate missionary disciples, a social media program that will be accessible to any of us to get ongoing religious education through workshops, through retreats, through all kinds of educational processes. And it's all free to us. And so it's another priority that the bishop is working on. In the gospel today, we heard Jesus commission his apostles. As the Father has sent me, so I send you. You heard me several times during Lent and the beginning of Easter reminding us that we're ambassadors for Christ and that we share in the mission to bring good news, not only to our parish community, but also to the wider church in the diocese. And so each year at this time, you probably guessed by now, we have the bishop's annual appeal. And it is to help the bishop to meet those 3 priorities and to carry on the rest of the activities that a diocese needs to do and only can do. And he has given as a pledge, or as a goal for us, or target for us this year, the bishop's annual appeal of $86,226. That's a high goal and a high target, but we're a parish that has grown. And I fully understand that none of us has unlimited resources. And I'm also aware that in any given year, statistically, of all of the registered parishioners that are on a list, only about 50% of them participate in the bishop's appeal. And so the burden falls on the other 50% who are trying to do what they can to help meet this burden. And if every registered parishioner participated, of all 507 families that are registered, and each pledged and paid $171, we would easily meet our goal. But being realistic, it's probably not going to happen. So as I consider my pledge, and I do pledge, and I have to pledge to 2 parishes, because I'm pastor of 2. And when I consider my pledge, I will make my pledge to both parishes double that 171 figure to help cover the reality that not all will participate. I know everyone may not be able to do that, and I'm not asking you to, but I am asking that we please do what we can. And so we're going to listen right now to Bishop Bradley's short presentation, reminding us of those goals that he has set and priorities for the diocese. And at the end of it, and during the week, we ask you, once you receive your packet, to pray over what you've heard and ask the Lord, how can you respond in generosity to his request?